Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Thank you for joining us through the marvels of cyberspace. Isn't it great how today means like today, me here recording this, but also today, as in you, whatever day it may be that you're listening? Anyways, a little bit of an aside. In today's podcast, I talked to Deborah Robertson. Deborah is the director of Catholic Mission in the Diocese of Bunbury, and she's also a fellow plenary council member. Stumbling over my words here. Deborah first started working out of the diocesan office a few years ago, and over the years I've gotten to know her, and I must admit that my respect and appreciation for her has grown over the years as more I talk about her, and especially recently as we're talking about the Plenary Council. So let me give you a quick introduction. Deborah grew up in WA in Victoria. She completed Year 11 and 12 at Mercedes College in Perth. Her first job was in 1968 as a part-time shop assistant, and her career has so far spanned over 53 years as an office worker, a public servant, a teacher, a principal, a university lecturer, and in addition to her current role as the director for Catholic Mission, she has also taken up the opportunity to run retreats and mission education sessions at the Holy Family Church in Kirrop. So she's created what she calls the Spirituality Hub in Kirrop at the Holy Family Church, where they have different events. And they've had a few plenary council um, discernment days and also a few quiet reflection days as well. Check it out if you haven't already. Deborah is a qualified spiritual director and also a Myers-Briggs facilitator. So she's been trained in the Myers-Briggs personality course. I don't know the full name. So we talk about a few things on this podcast. It's not very long, but hope you enjoy. And as always, feel free to leave us any questions or comments. Enjoy, guys. So Deborah, thank you for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
How are you today?
Yep, very good. Bit windy, as you can see.
Yeah, it's picked up a bit.
It has.
That's all right. So let's get right into it. So you have a very long CV, starting as a shop assistant and now director of Catholic Mission and now the Spirituality Hub. Can you share with us how your journey brought you to this point?
Well, I've always just tried to hear what God is saying to me and don't have a direct line to God like some people seem to have. So I've just gone one foot after the other and tried to live by my values and my faith, and here I am.
So tell us, as a shop assistant, where were you working? What were you doing? Can you?
Right, that was in Bowens in the Innaloo Shopping Centre. And I was in the handbag section, so totally foreign country, and I wasn't asked back, by the way, so that was a bit disappointing. It was a school holiday job and only the top people got invited back to do more, so that was my first failure, but I've got over it.
Okay, so tell us a bit about your academic background.
Well, I was always a good student at school and I loved learning and I was a good girl. But the one thing, the nuns always went to Catholic schools, always wanted me to be a teacher, and that was the one thing I was never ever going to do. So I left school and went into the workplace, mainly doing office work, and I travelled. And then after thinking where my life would go, I decided that God was calling me to be a teacher, as much as it wasn't on my list. And I started at university then when I was 23, going on 24, and pretty much only stopped about 3 years ago.
Oh wow, that recent.
Yeah, and I worked my way through diplomas and bachelor degrees and master's degrees and a couple of doctorates, and then still love study and learning, but have pulled the plug on actually signing up for formal courses.
All right. So what was the most challenging for you in all of that in terms of academics? What did you find?
I suppose I never had the luxury of being a full-time student. I was always working while I was studying, and time management isn't my top skill, so that was always, I'd often be working as a principal all day, getting home after meetings and then writing a 5,000 word assignment between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. So that was challenging, but I actually liked that challenge, which is why I kept going.
Yeah. So do you do your best thinking at night? Are you one of those sort of?
I did when I was younger, I actually still do, but I used to be able to get up early and have studied late and get up early, but I can't do that anymore.
It's interesting because a lot of people will tell young people these days that you shouldn't stay up late and you should get your homework done early or your assignments done early. But I suppose for you that didn't work, so you just did what
Look,
works.
it's all about personality, and as a teacher, the more prescriptive and narrow that education got, sadly, as I went on, it was more and more directed at a particular kind of child and personality, which I felt was very unfair. Like, you'd always have maths and the heavy subjects in the morning. Well, hello, 25% of us aren't morning people, so I always felt that discriminated. And it is very important to understand that we're all different and to cater for people's different needs. So you have to find what works for you. You can't avoid discipline, you can't avoid being persevering if you want to achieve anything, but you've got to do it in the way that suits your personality and lifestyle, and that's sometimes you really have to fight for that to be able to happen.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I suppose you've had quite a few sort of times where you've had to stand up for something that you sort of believed in and sort of make quite a strong stance in, you know, in education or in the church or whatnot. Can you share with us maybe one of those times?
Well, I suppose as a teacher, I stood up a few times for children that, felt they should be moved on to another school, when I felt that it was our job to work with them and their families. And I guess one of my proudest moments as a principal was when one young man was going on to high school, and he'd caused a headache for many people in the school and his parents. But when he signed his farewell card to me, it said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." So, sorry, just felt a bit emotional then. So that was a great feedback for me, that you do have to stick to your guns and not give up on people. And you don't always see the reward for that, but you still, again, have to stick to what you believe and believe in people.
Yeah, and it's interesting that because working with young people and with young people, often they are very standoffish, aren't they? They sort of, they sort of tell you, no, we don't want this, or go away. But in some sense, you have to persevere through that and to be able to sort of reach them. And when you do, they actually really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So,
it all comes back to relationship.
yeah. Right. So tell us about the work you're doing now as in Catholic Mission.
Yeah.
And what's all that about?
Okay, well, it's great to be talking about that in the year of the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Society for the Propagation of the Faith by Pauline Jaricot, who will be beatified on the 22nd of May. And really someone I didn't know anything about till I started working for Catholic Mission. And I now realise she was the ultimate modern woman, single lay woman, which is why you've probably never heard of her. But again, someone who was ahead of her time with social justice, with supporting people with economic grants so they could, get out of prostitution and start a small business to survive on. Just so many things about her. I hope you'll find out more about her. And Catholic Mission, which is the Australian name for the Pontifical Mission Societies, supporting mainly overseas missions, as Catholic Church has always done, and is how we have a Catholic Church in Australia, because that society supported the beginnings of the Church in Australia, especially Catholic education in Western Australia. So it's got a very proud history, and again, being a baby boomer who was in Catholic schools in the 50s and 60s, took supporting the missions for granted. But now we are competing with many, many other worthwhile causes, and it's actually quite hard to keep saying, well, Catholic Mission is part of our tradition, part of our international family of Catholics, and we need to support each other as we have done since the beginning of the Church, but especially through Catholic Mission in the last 200 years. So it's easy to be committed to this kind of work. Of course, as I said, there's a lot of competition out there. It's not always easy, but I'm very grateful to have had this opportunity.
Yeah, right. And so your day-to-day sort of tasks as Director of Catholic Mission, like what's a typical day for you?
Well, I'm only part-time, so there really isn't a typical day because it's a bit of responding to the most pressing need at the time. So, as I've said, we've got the Women with a Mission weekend. No, I didn't say that, but that's coming up to celebrate Pauline Jaricot's beatification on the 22nd of May, and also remembering Sister Irene McCormack on the 21st of May, who, as you know, is a West Australian missionary who was murdered in Peru. So I'm putting a fair bit of time into organising that. Other times it will be getting ready to go and talk at parish masses to present the mission appeal, which can be presented any time of the year outside of Lent, of course. And so that, in course, in a country parish diocese involves a lot of travelling. Plus, especially in my first couple of years, it was going out to schools because schools had totally lost in the Bunbury Diocese any connection with Catholic Mission. So it was going back and saying almost every week, Catholic Mission is not Caritas. Caritas is wonderful, but Catholic Mission is something else. So still trying after 5 years to get that message out there. So and then there's the basic clerical work, as I said, of counting money, putting money in the bank, sending birthday cards to donors and that kind of thing. So it is a very varied job.
Yeah, wow. And I want to pick up on something about the event you mentioned. Celebrating Women with a Mission was what it's called.
Yeah.
What is the unique contribution you would say that women do make, have made and can make to mission?
Yeah, well, you've got to have a broad understanding of mission, and as you know, Pope Francis is calling us all to be missionary disciples, and somewhere in my life I did pick up that you don't have to go to Peru to be a missionary, even though of course we need some people to do that. You're a missionary in your daily life, and if you go into any parish, who will you see doing most of the mundane work to keep the church going, Aaron?
Oh, women,
Yeah.
always.
So women, of course, have that, if you like, important domestic role, because where would we be without homes running smoothly and lovingly? And the same with the church. We need all the basic daily work done. And then we have people, women taking on special projects that aren't necessarily unique to women, but are often left to women to do. For example, we have pregnancy assistance operating with a lady called Janet Mazza. That's mission work. We have so many women in Catholic schools, and many of them totally committed to their work as mission, and let's hope that we have even more of those who do see their work as mission. Bringing up your children, what is more missionary than forming missionary disciples in the home? So yes, there are unique things women could do, a lot of things men and women could both do, but for some reason certain roles are restricted to one or the other. But yeah, as I said, you will see women there, the backbone of the church.
Yeah, and I actually didn't mention this at the beginning, but you're also a member of the Plenary Council, and you yourself have had quite a mission-led life, I guess. Tell us about, I guess, your journey in being a woman, being in those sort of leadership roles, and also, how mission has driven you to do the things you've done.
Well, for me, mission is fundamentally building the kingdom of God. And again, I don't know at what point in my life that got totally drilled into me in the best way. That's how I've always seen it. I'm always confused when people say, oh, what does mission really mean? What's a definition of mission? I think Jesus was absolutely clear. It's about spreading the good news. And so in that sense, that's what I've committed my whole life to. So that's led everything that I try to do.
Yeah, great. No, thank you, and thank you for everything that you have done as well. Where would we be, as Deborah said, without women in our church driving different things?
Yep.
So yeah, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about your work in the Spirituality Hub in Kirrop.
Yep.
Tell us firstly how that came about.
Well, it came about, I was doing a mission appeal at Balingup Parish, and there was a great sense of upset there, and it turned out the next day Holy Name Church, Holy Family Church in Kirrup was being closed, and it was a bit of a surprise to me that a church could be closed without anyone in the diocese knowing about it. So, long story short, we were given permission to use the church and we at a spirituality centre, which I felt God was calling that to happen. We decided on the name Spirituality Hub, and so I also have a great commitment to contemplative prayer in daily life, a contemplative secular life, if you like, not being enclosed, obviously. And I wanted the Spirituality Hub to be that kind of space. So we have a quiet day once a month where people just come and we pray communally and individually in different ways. And then we've had, I think, 10 events so far in the last year, beginning with the 21st of May last year, which was the 30th anniversary of the death of Sister Irene, and then continuing on covering liturgical music, Ignatian spirituality, social justice statement, and have varying numbers of people come. But tell me the worst time in history to begin a spirituality centre. How about in the middle of a COVID pandemic? So I think given that, it's been well supported, and it looks like we have been given the option to have a 5-year lease, and we're just working on the negotiating the terms of that. So hopefully we'll be able to continue and streamline things to cater for the formation needs, which, going back to the plenary council, is what comes up time and time again. People asking for lay formation, clergy formation as well, but we see ourselves as trying to provide lay formation, and hopefully this can fill a need.
Yeah, and I love the idea of spirituality in the everyday and for the everyday person, because you're right, when you're in a community or a religious community, it's very easy to sort of keep up spiritual practices and be in that space. But when you're working or studying or looking after kids or whatever it may be, it's quite difficult. So having a place like Kirrup is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think probably what's one of the things in my work that has come up time and time again is the need for spirituality and the thirst for spirituality. Even if people don't necessarily know that that's what it is, it often is, that's what it is. And we see today, like, a lot of young people are looking at things like yoga and mindfulness and different sort of ancient wisdoms and whatnot, which I think is all linked to spirituality.
Of course.
And we in the church maybe haven't done a great job at sort of talking about spirituality either, to link in with that sense of depth. So I wanted to ask someone who maybe knows a little bit more about it than me, how would you define the term spirituality?
Yeah. Well, spirituality is, that dimension of us that is a mystery. But it's in everybody, and it, as you say, it's exhibited in every way. I mean, when we have any of our horrible events, the first thing people want to do is go and light a candle and put flowers. I mean, that's expressing our spirituality, our spiritual connection with each other and with God, even if people don't realise that's what it is. Because as a mainstream Christian, spirituality for me cannot be disconnected from religion, but people don't like the word religion. Yeah. So you can connect with people on a spiritual level because it taps into the artistic side of humanity, the hopes and desires that people have for their lives. That's all their spirituality. And as you say, what is mindfulness other than contemplation or meditation? Yeah. We just seem to have a need to invent new words for what is part of our Catholic tradition and has been since the beginning.
Yeah, and I think I'll know your answer to this already, but how important do you think spirituality is in the life of a person?
Well, of course, to me, it's core to who you are. Your spirituality is who you are, not what you do, but who you are as a human being. So, and it's how we recognise each other. We talk about in social justice, the dignity of the human person. Well, that's where it begins, recognising the essence of the other person, and that is the spirit in that other person.
Yeah, and I think I love that sense of spirituality is integral and core to us, you know, like we're spiritual beings, and
Absolutely.
so even if we ignore it, it's sort of a type of neglect, you know. We have physical needs, we have mental health needs,
Absolutely.
but we also have spiritual needs that are important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think people misunderstand about spirituality?
Well, I suppose when they connect it immediately with the negative aspects of religion and see it as rules and regulations about things, which we know as human beings, we all live within a framework. But many people don't want other people naming that framework, even though I'm quite sure that they're not going out and breaking the fifth commandment and, you know, that kind of thing. But they just, for some reason we're very resistant in this era at living within a framework that we haven't invented ourselves. And I think Pope Benedict called that the sin of relativism. You know, that what I think is right is what is right, but actually we have a communal human understanding of what is right and wrong, and you're impoverished if you don't connect with that.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And it's interesting because you see on social media now, well, I see on social media now, a lot of these short videos that are giving sort of wisdom and advice and whatnot. And for someone who has no background in it, it just sounds, oh, that's great, that person's come up with it. But often it's not actually that original. It's often very ancient ideas going back to as far back as Aristotle, Plato,
Absolutely.
Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine. And I think in some sense we in the church, in ministry, have sort of, at some point we must have stopped making that link between, as you say, religion and spirituality. We sort of started focusing maybe in the wrong area. We stopped exposing people to the deep spirituality of the church. So very glad for the work you're doing at Kirrop.
Thank you.
What would you say is unique then about Catholic spirituality as opposed to some of these modern forms of spirituality?
Well, it's just so rich and deep and broad, and I've trained as a spiritual director in an ecumenical group, and what is it all based on? Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross. I do think the contemplative stream is reuniting Christians in a common faith, which we lost with the Reformation, etc. So we just, as I say, have all these wonderful people in our tradition, and we all relate to different, some people relate to Franciscan spirituality, and in a sense, you know, New Age and creation spirituality connects with that beautifully, and if people don't make that connection, they're missing out. And we have the traditional monastic spirituality of St. Benedict, but that has been well developed for lay people to be able to engage with that, as with Ignatian spirituality. So we just have such depth, and I never get tired of learning about other wonderful people in our tradition and entering into their way of spirituality. That's what we have to offer, and people are taking it up.
Yeah. Now you mentioned something there which I love personally, and I've had a spiritual director for many years, or for different parts of my life as well. Can you tell us what a spiritual director is and what that sort of looks like?
Well, again, it can look a little different in different traditions. You know, there are some Protestant denominations where it's like, no, you don't have a spiritual director because God's your spiritual director. And when I was growing up, only the professional religious would have had a spiritual director, and it would have been a priest. And but it's broadened now, and I think it's so needed. And again, I wish more people would take up the option. It's really walking together with someone on their spiritual journey. And I'm in the contemplative stance tradition, which is very explicit in that you are sitting with the other person in the presence of God, and you are creating a space to enable that person to focus on what the Holy Spirit is saying to them, and then working with them, or gently supporting them to live that out. So it's God's process, but the spiritual director, again, one of my favourite words, is really a facilitator of that journey of that person with God.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the fact that there's someone there with you traveling, and so often we think of spirituality as an alone activity, as that it's all just within our own heads and hearts.
Exactly.
But it was never intended like that.
No.
We've always been intended to be in a community and with others.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's right. Well, tell us, is there anything else you'd like to talk to us about or add?
No, I just thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that people listening might have heard something that they want to follow up further, and I'm sure Aaron can put you in touch with any of the concepts that we've touched on today if you want to know more about it.
Yes, I'm very happy to do that, so you're welcome to contact us. Now, there's two other things that I'm going to spring on you.
Uh-oh.
The first one is, what advice would you give young people today?
Okay, well, there's so many opportunities, such a variety of choices that you can make about your life, and that can make it more difficult than the limited choices I had, for example, when I left school. So pray. You mightn't have a formal spiritual director, but you've got a wise person in your life. Take advice, listen to other people, pray, and if you're pretty sure you've made the right choice, but it's being more difficult than you expected, that doesn't mean it's not the right choice. Keep persevering. I would say the one word that I have succeeded, the one thing I've succeeded in my life is persevering. And when things seem a bit dark and difficult, and they will, that's the other thing I want you to hear, it will be dark and difficult at times. You will work through that. And after you've gone through the first difficult, dark time, you'll realise this is part of life. God is with you. Take advice, have spiritual company, and persevere.
Great. Very, very wise words. Thank you for that, Deborah. And the final thing is, we actually do a Catholic Q&A section where we always invite our podcast guests to come back. We invite our listeners, if you have any questions, in the video description we'll have a link to a Google form where they can submit questions. So hopefully you'll be open to coming back, and if anyone has any questions, maybe sharing some answers to that.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and morning for us, but wherever you're listening from. We hope you've enjoyed our little podcast with Deborah Robertson, and thank you, Deborah.
Thanks everyone. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. God bless everyone.